I won't call you Mr. Chairman and gentlemen.
No. There's a gentleman over there.
Keep far away, I can't see you. Well, Alan, many thanks indeed for your early history from the G point of view. Unfortunately, neither our friend you referred to, Witt, is not here, and I am very, very sorry that Arnold House is not here.
Yes,
because he would be able to go back 10 years before I took it at all. But the start of it, from what I remember, was when the First World War finished. Of course, during that period there were no licences at all. We tried quite hard. The Institute was, I can't say reorganised, that's hardly the word, but quite a number of the operators of the transports got together and had a reassembly at 122 Little Collins Street from memory. I think it was the Marconi School in those days. And that would have been in 1919. And we approached the Navy, who was still in charge of radio, for licences. After a lot of chit-chat back both ways, mainly via the Postal Department, they did grant us receiving licences with a V prefix and a number. It wasn't until towards the end of 1921 when the Navy handed over the authority and control of wireless, as it was in those days, back to the PMG department, that they issued transmitting licences for, I think it was 10 watts only. Well, in those days the Institute had moved from 122 Little Collins Street down to the Arcade Hall in Chapel Street, Paran, where they had a quarter kilowatt spark set. I don't know where on earth it came from, but I think it was probably one of the pre-war jobs put back on the air. And we used to operate it from memory every Tuesday night. Well, it was there that the first idea of DX was brought up. It wasn't called DX in those days or anything of that sort, but it was an argument that started, if I remember rightly, between Howard Love and Tommy Court. There was also Bill Connery, Charlie Heim, Page, I don't remember his name. Stan Page, yes, and a few others, and myself as very much of a junior. The argument was about whether radio signals ever actually died out, or whether they would keep going indefinitely. Well, there were some thought one way, some thought the other, and it was from that, from the argument there, that it was decided that we'd see what we could do to proving it one way or the other. And communication, this is overseas communication, was a very, very slow thing compared to the instantaneous stuff of today. And it took us 3 months to get a letter written from here to the ARRL, and another 3 months before their reply came back to us. And the outcome of it was that for the month of March 1923, the Americans were to call Australians collectively, not individually, and in each case use a 5-letter code word for identification purposes. Well, I can remember quite well that that was a drought year, and we could hear nothing until the 11th of March. And then we'd been listening for it. Of course, the test was for the whole of March. On the night of the 11th, I was listening like...
What wavelength was this, mate?
Oh, this was, the Americans were calling us from 200 to 250 metres.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was listening away there, and I thought, oh, what's that noise? I whipped the earphones off. Yes, it was the telephone ringing. So I dashed inside, the shack was outside, and it was Ross House, 3JU on the phone. Had I heard 6GCW? No, I hadn't. But he told me it was on 232 metres, and to listen for him. Anyway, I dashed back to the shack and listened, and I didn't hear him. But the next night I did hear him. Well, that was the first American signal heard in Australia that's on record at all. That was on the night of the 11th of March. On the 12th, incidentally, it had started to rain on the 11th, on the 10th rather. On the 11th, the signals came through. On the 12th, listening for 6CGW that JU had told me about, I heard 6AWT and logged his code word. Anyway, going back a little bit before that, of course, there was a certain amount of publicity about these forthcoming trans-Pacific tests, and apparently some fairly good work was put in by the committee of the Institute from a publicity point of view and amongst the trade. And of course the trade absolutely poo-pooed the whole idea of it, and I think altogether there was something like £130 worth of equipment offered as prizes, split up. Well, I don't know what the proportion was, but I know that the first was for about £100 worth, and the second and third, whatever it works out at. Well, the point was to get as many American call signs that we didn't, they could have been from anywhere, but was to log these code words that coincided with the call sign. And I had the good fortune to get the most, and I collected around about £100 worth of open orders on the trade, which gave me my start. And amongst the things that I got from Philips was a Z4 tube.
Z2A.
No, it was Z4. Now, before that, I had been playing around with the Z2As, the double-ended things with two light sockets, one on each end, and then the Z2Bs that had a 4-pin English-type socket on them. But with those, the high capacity of those tubes, I think I had finished up with 4 of them in parallel. I could work on around about 150, 160 metres was the lowest in wavelength that I could get down to. In the meantime, Ross Hull, who had gone up to Sydney then with Charlie McClurkin, and they were going flat out also to try, of course, to put a signal through to America. Then Charlie McClurkin with Jack Davis, 2DS, went on board, I think it was the SS Tahiti, to see how far across the Pacific they could follow the signals. And they were all right, and copied, I think it was Phil Nolan, 2YI, who was operating Charlie McClurkin's rig while they were away for them. They copied him and Harold Cox and Ross Hull and myself and one or two others, just a little bit the other side of Honolulu. And then they lost us entirely in the terrific QRM from all the, I think it was 22,000 American amateurs on the air in those days. But Charlie McClurkin did think on one occasion he heard his own call sign coming from his own station operated by 2YI. But we held another Trans-Pacific receiving contest in I think it was November 1923, and it was just as different as chalk from cheese. Signals coming through more or less all night, every night, providing you could get them through the QRN. And where I think it was 22 stations I logged in the March contest. There was more like 122 in the November one.
Sunspot shifted.
Yes, might have been sunspot. I haven't worked that out. I must do that one of these days. But then, as I say, I managed, when I fired up this Z4 in place of the other chips in parallel, I got down to well, something under 100 metres. But then I was sent over to Tasmania, over to Launceston, to endeavour to clean up the what was commonly called the Launceston Raw. There was making broadcast reception more or less impossible. It was bad enough for the ship stations to try and work it out. And I don't know why they gave me the credit for curing it, because I didn't cure it. Certainly I did put them on the track as to where it was coming from. And that was the DC power supply at 200 volts from the good old commutator equipped DC generators being fed into the wires, which was okay, except that the wires, instead of just being run along the posts and that sort of thing, on load and so on, it was supported all the way along from other wires on the posts, and that other wire, inductively coupled right round everywhere, was not earthed. And so I put them on the track of that, and apparently that was the end of the Launceston Raw. But while I was over there, the grapevine came through with the report that ZL4AA, our friend Bell, had worked G2OD and so on. Well, of course, I couldn't get back quick enough. I'd done the job to the best of my ability over there. I still had quite a lot of expense money left, but I came back and got on the air as quickly as I could. And the first station I really worked, it must have been something to do with sunspot cycle, because the first station that I worked after I got back was Ivan O'Meara, ZL...
AC.
2AC. 2AC, was it?
Yes,
yes, that's right. And he said, oh, you've got a terrific signal, Max. I'm quite certain you'd get through to the States. Can you come on the air tomorrow night, which was November the 2nd. It was Cup Eve, I know. And I'd been able to get away from work a bit earlier than usual because of the holiday next day, and I was to call Ivan at 7:30 our time. Well, I had an early tea and got on about 6:15, And I called Ivan O'Meara. 6 AHP came back to me, and that was it. I didn't need Ivan back him all the same. Now, then of course, similarly as in the case with the Gs, once the channel was sort of broken through, stations right, left and centre started working the Ws. And the part that really amused me was that, well, I felt that since I could work America, I didn't see any reason why I couldn't work the Gs too, since the ZLs had. So I started getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and getting on and calling. Well, apparently Charlie McClurkin did the same thing, and he heard me calling, and he wrote a lovely little par in Sealand and Air, I think it was in those days, about these goats down in VK3 who were getting up trying to work England. But the joke was on him, because before that was published, we had done it. And as I say again, I think, what's his name, Harold Cox, or Archie Cox, whichever you like, 3BD as he was in those days, what's his call now?
2GU. 1GU,
that's right. I think he actually heard G2OD answering me before I heard him answering me on the morning. But anyway, that went through, and as in the case of with the ZLs, cables were exchanged, and it was verified. And then the next thing was, from my point of view, now I must mention that I was, after winning the Trans-Pacific test, I went to up to see the PMG department, see old Jimmy Malone, and Jack Martin and Bill Connery and so on, asking for a power permit.
Stop transmitting.
Yes, asking them for a permit. Where do you live? Box Hill. Oh, right out in the Mulga. Oh, yes. You can use a kilowatt, do as you like, but don't interfere. Any trouble, out. So I took jolly good care that I didn't. But they had, in differentiation, the conditions here to other parts of the world, nothing was said about the type of transmission that was to be used. Where I understand the Gs and the Americans, of course there were no Ws or Gs or anything else in those days, it was just call signs. I didn't see any reason why, if we could get CW through with signals up to S7 at times, that with anything like reasonable modulation shouldn't be able to use speech. And it was on the morning of February the 9th, 1925, that I had everything teed up with a revamped Ford coil as the modulation transformer and a carbon mic. I was all set to go to with 2OD, who in the meantime had built a shortwave super heterodyne. I think it was the first that was ever built, but he certainly had the stability with it. And I called him on CW, and back he came, and all set to go. Power went off. Well, that's when conditions were at their peak, but that was around about 4:45. 10 to 6 the power came on again, so I called G2OD again. Yes, he was still there. What was the matter? Oh, the power had been switched off, and that was that. Anyway, I said, will you stand by for phone? So I gave him a shout on phone. Back he came. All phone audible, mostly intelligible. And that was the the first overseas speech. Oh, I could go on for ages, but that's enough, isn't it?
No. Carry on, Max.
Did you ever use loop modulation? You know,
Soup loop.
Item of interest was that I built a shortwave superhet myself, and with that I heard PCJ, the broadcast station from Eindhoven in Holland, and I was telling the chaps in the Institute about it, and Stan Gadsden said to me, he was the president at that time, he'd like to hear it, and I said, well, come out, and he said, oh, I don't think I can do that. Ring me up on the phone when you get him next time. So anyway, the following evening I heard him, so I rang up Stan Gadsden, and what was his call? SW, that's right. Rang up Stan and said, can you hear this? And I put the old, what was it, an old, no, never mind, some type of loudspeaker I had, no, it wasn't a moving coil or anything of that sort, it was just, put this up close to the mouthpiece of the, no, I said, here it appeared. He said, now look, what about fixing it up properly, and I'll see if I can rebroadcast it. So that'll be all right. The next night we tried it and put this over the line, and it went for about 3 minutes and cut off. You can't do that there, and so on. And anyway, of course, Stan Gadsden and Jimmy Malone were just like that. So Stan wanted to know how and why, so he rang me up and said, okay, if you can do it again tomorrow morning, we'll be right. So I did it again tomorrow morning, and when I rang the exchange, I asked for that. Oh, yes, Mr. Howden, that'll be quite all right. We've wired this in through the back of the switchboard. And that, I think, was the first overseas rebroadcast. Next item was one that Alan mentioned, Fred Snell and Ed Willis and the work that they did in the Navy there, and of course they teed it up for them to have the first crystal controlled transmitter on the what do they call it? Not HMS, but the USS Seattle. And they had Fred Snell operating it with Ed Willis 60S as second op and so on. And well, there was quite a write-up in QST about this wonderful crystal control transmitter, which I think was a little bit later on than you mentioned, Alan, with goiter and the crystal. But it was in 1925. Anyway, we heard that the fleet was coming out with this wonderful crystal control transmitter, and it told us that it was a quartz crystal. Well, that was enough for me. It was enough for Harry Cowper, old
KP.
5BG,
5BG,
and also for Wally Coxon, 6 AM AG, that's right. 6 AG sent over to England for one. Harry Cowper took a box of cigars along to the foreman at the Quartzite quarries in the Mount Lofty Ranges and got some beautiful specimens. I went up to an old friend of Ross House, Wally Abrahams, the secretary of the Geological Museum here.
Where did the pebbles come in, the spectral pebbles?
Oh, they didn't come till after that.
Oh, that was after.
And anyway, oh yes, Wally was delighted to see me. Incidentally, Ross Hull always used to service his broadcast receiver, and when Ross went up to Sydney, he asked me would I take it over, and I had taken it over, and I'd met Wally before, so I had the edge in that way. Anyway, oh yes, quartz crystals. Come down into the basement. Oh, we had stacks of the darn things there. Anyway, he gave me a small piece out like this. Yeah, that's quartz crystal, is it? Yes, that's quartz crystal. Anyway, I took it home and I spent, I think it was 5 nights with the hacksaw blade reversed in the frame and carborundum and so on. Anyway, I managed to lop a chunk off this. And then actually, it wouldn't have been too far from either an 80 or a BT. I'm not certain which, because it was taken off the angle at the top. But anyway, I built up the oscillator as required, and I played and played and played, and nothing, not a trace of anything at all. In the meantime, time was getting short. The fleet had left Honolulu and were on their way to New Zealand. So I rode over to, in the meantime I heard Harry Cowper come on with the first VK crystal control transmitter. It didn't sound like the modern one at all because he was using self-rectification, but it was still just a beautiful stability that was altogether different from the old QSY that the normal sets had. And so I rode over to him and asked him that he found out anything that I should know about it. He said, no, it's all in more or less in QST. Send the rock over to me, I'll see if it'll work in my oscillator. So I posted it over to him, and I got a letter back from him. Dear Max, your crystal will not work. In the first place, it's a bit of road metal. In the second place, it's all hills and valleys. I'll tell you what you should have. I'm sending you a slice cut from alongside my crystal. Of course, one glance at it told me that his was clear quartz, mine was smoky, milky quartz. Anyway, I flattened this piece off and put it in and walked. So I went up and I saw Wally again. I put it over him and got some of the real stuff. And from then on it wasn't so bad. Trials and tribulations, still get them. But it's been very, very interesting right through.
Who woke up with the spectacle lenses originally, Max? Do you remember? Or how did they get on the
I'm inclined to think that was Ross House too.
I think it was, yes, because they raided every optician around the place. That was when I first came into the picture.
Yes, well now, getting back to the Goiter lock system, believe me, we all tried it, and tried it well and truly, and as you say, it is possible with it to control a quarter of a kilowatt with 5 to 10 watts.
1 bit of course.
With the one oscillator, but I'd hate to try to modulate it.
We wouldn't want to do that.
But for CW it would go well. Now, I don't think I can think of anything else offhand. Back to the old idea. Any questions?
When you were doing all this work, very small school, starting to hear about ham radio, who else was there? There was Howard Love, apart from yourself, there was Howard Love. Who were the other ones? You mentioned Holst and
Ross House.
Give us the names of those people. When we were kids.
Yes, well, there was first and foremost Ross Hull, Howard Love, Tommy Court, Page, Charlie Heim. Yes, he lived down in Elswick. There was Harold Cox. I think 3 a.m. Yes, there's Bert Maddox. And
Of course, Al's
Norm Culliver, Masters.
Masters, yes.
But he came a little bit later.
Benjamin Masters.
Tell me, is Fred Snell still alive? I know he was very sick there for many years. I don't know. He had some multiple sclerosis or something.
Payne and Turek.
Yes, oh, Captain Payne, yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to...
I heard Max say Charlie Hart.
Your name, please?
Ray Shortell.
Thank you.
I was a snotty in Knickerbockers, and I heard about this wireless business, you see, and I got a spark coil, and I about hectares and inductances and all that. And 3BU Dermot Conley, he's now shut off, we were talking to each other, and one day there was a knock on the door, and my mother said to me, there are two gentlemen at the door that want to see you. So I went up to the front door, and these two chaps were there, and one said, my name is Charlie Hine. I'd like you to meet Stan Page. I said, how do you do? They said, are you interested in the wireless? I said, yes. You've been sort of sending signals out? And I said, yes. What have you been transmitting? Well, I said, there's a book of poetry called In Realms of Gold, and I've been transmitting this. Dermot Conley can hear it at the other end of the street. Well, fancy that. Do you realise that you're doing the wrong thing? And I said, no, I don't. So they said, well, it is wrong, actually. Did you know that VIM was calling you interfering with traffic? And I said, you probably remember this, man. They enticed me to join the Wireless Institute, and I heard Max say Charlie Hine, and he was my mentor. It's rather wonderful to hear his name mentioned.
Here he is. Name, please.
Rainbow, Jolly Roger, 3JR.
Yeah.
The original call sign. But gentlemen, many of you before the 1930s heard this conversation go over the air. The first time in my life, and it was reported in the magazines in Australia too, about a pirate talking to a rum runner. I don't know whether you remember this. It was at the time the planet Mars was close to the Earth, and we're listening on the 20-metre band, and all of a sudden there was a station calling all stations, signing MARS. And I picked up my ears, so did many other people throughout Australia and everything like that. And it turned out a chap signing the call sign, ATNA from China, answered this communication to MARS, and he said, are you on this earth, old man, or where are you? The other chap said, no, you blanky fool, I'm about 2,000 miles out of Honolulu. But he said, will you send me a card? Give me your address and I'll send you a card. He said, I can't give you an address because for private reasons. So he said to AC8NA, can you give me your address and I'll send you my card? And they agreed to send their cards via an amateur in Sydney. And it turned out that AC8NA was a pirate operating in a pirate's nest down south of Hong Kong there where they used to raid ships. He was 60 years of age, running this wireless station, and the chap MARS was on a rum runner, running rum into the States during the Prohibition period, and he heard about all the people sending cablegrams over the Rugby wireless station in England to communicate to Mars, and he's decided to use the call sign MARS, and that's how a pirate talked to a rum runner.
No. You've heard of the reg Jewish Dennis Harkin, VK3BQ. Sorry about that. You've no doubt heard about the Reg Jewish Club, but there was, I don't know whether it still exists or not, the Australian Reg Jewish Club. I think it's fallen by the wayside. But back in the 1920s, Trevor Evans, you no doubt, he's still on deck. Two in S. He formed the Australian Reg Jewish Club, and he nominated Lee Paul, who was then latterly known as Lee Paul, but his name was Leo. He was then 3LP, and myself then, as foundation members of the Australian Reg Jewish Club for Victoria, for the simple reason that on one night we were using leap absorption modulation with a carbon microphone, and I was at the end of the QSO, 4¼ hours. I'm tossing the microphone from one hand to the other because I can't hold it. 4¼ hours was the QSO with leap absorption modulation, and Trevor Evans nominated us as foundation members for Victoria of the RCC.
Thank you. Next again, please.
Again? Yes, what you reminded me of this, talking about Mars. In the early days, I think it was very early 1925, I was listening over the band, and I heard the station signing E-A-R-T-H. I couldn't, it took me a long, long while to take a wake up, but it was a Spanish station, EAR 6.
That's right.